The dismissal letter shook in Amara Okafor's trembling hands as she stood in the marble lobby of Maid Group. Dozens of well-dressed employees watched. Not one of them said a word in her defense. 30 minutes earlier, this same woman had thrown herself between armed men and a terrified 6-year-old girl. Now she stood being fired in front of everyone who'd watched her do it. Han Soo-jin looked at her the way she looked at a stain on the marble floor. Cleaning floors was the only thing you were hired to do. Saving people wasn't. Amara didn't argue. She had learned long ago that people like her weren't allowed to be heroes, only help. She turned and walked toward the exit, past the whispers, past the stares. She had no idea the little girl she'd shielded wasn't an ordinary visitor. By tomorrow morning, the most powerful man she'd never met would turn that entire company upside down because of her. Amara Okafor had come to Seoul 8 years ago on a scholarship, full of plans to finish her degree and build a life she'd once only dreamed about back in Lagos. Then her father died, and his family swept in before the funeral flowers had even wilted, claiming the house, the savings, everything that should have gone to her mother and younger brother. There was nothing left for Amara to go home to. Only 2 people back in Nigeria who needed her more than ever, and a scholarship that couldn't cover rent once she dropped out to work full-time. So she stayed. She scrubbed floors at Maid Group instead of finishing exams, and every month, most of her paycheck went straight into a wire transfer, one portion for her mother's medication, one for her younger brother's school fees, both of them counting on her from thousands of miles away. She knew every creak in the marble floors and every executive who never once looked her in the eye. She arrived before sunrise and left long after dark, pushing her cart through hallways that smelled like money, cleaning up after people who never learned her name. They had other names for her instead. "Watch it," a young associate muttered one morning, stepping around her cart like it carried something contagious. "Some of us don't have all day to wait for you to move." She heard the laughter that trailed her down the hall more times than she cared to count. She let it slide off her, the way rain slides off a roof, because there was no version of quitting that didn't end with her mother going without medicine. So she kept her head down and stayed kind, because kindness was the one thing nobody could take from her, even when they'd taken almost everything else. She returned a lost wallet to a finance director who never said thank you. She walked an elderly visitor to the right floor when he got turned around near the parking garage, staying until his car arrived. She covered a coworker's shift without being asked when his daughter spiked a fever, and she kept a tin of peppermints in her apron pocket just for the overnight security guards nobody else remembered existed. Han Soo-jin ran that building like she'd built it herself, elegant, sharp-eyed, feared by everyone below her. She had a gift for finding the smallest mistake in someone's day and turning it into a public referendum on their worth. "This is unacceptable," she said one morning, holding up a smudge on a glass door as though it were evidence in a trial, her voice carrying across the lobby. "If you can't manage something this simple, I have to wonder what else you're failing at." Amara apologized, the way she always did, swallowing the words she wanted to say instead. That same week, a memo went out to every department, short enough to read twice and strange enough to pass from desk to desk within the hour. Special guest arriving Thursday. Level 4 security protocol effective immediately. Nobody explained who the guest was. Nobody in that building had the clearance to ask. The guest turned out to be a 6-year-old girl in a cream-colored dress, walking into the lobby Thursday morning surrounded by more bodyguards than most visiting dignitaries received. Her name, employees whispered, was Kang Soo-ah. Beyond that, nobody knew anything, and the not knowing made everyone a little more careful than usual. The girl grew bored almost instantly, the way children do in buildings built entirely for adults. The executives who greeted her spoke over her head, more interested in impressing her security detail than the small girl standing quietly among them. Amara was the only one who crouched down to her level. "You look like you could use a friend," Amara said, offering a gentle smile. Soo-ah studied her for a long moment, the way children do when deciding whether an adult can be trusted, and then, unexpectedly, smiled back. They spent 20 minutes watering the office plants together, Amara showing her how to tell which ones were thirsty and which just needed sunlight, Soo-ah giggling every time water splashed her shoes. Amara slipped a peppermint into her small hand, and the girl unwrapped it like it was the finest gift she'd ever received. "Nobody talks to me like I'm a real person," Suah said quietly, turning the candy over in her fingers. "They talk to my bodyguards about me. Like I'm not even there." Something in Amara's chest ached at that. "Well, I see you," she said. "You're very real to me." Neither of them noticed the small, strange things happening that morning. A senior guard pulled off his usual post and reassigned to the far end of the building for reasons nobody explained, another guard grumbling that the day's schedule had changed twice since sunrise. Nobody thought much of it. Schedules changed all the time in a building this size. Nobody thought to ask why. The three men in maintenance jackets walked through the east entrance a little after noon, tools slung over their shoulders, badges clipped neatly to their belts. Amara noticed them by accident, wheeling her cart past the service hallway, and something about one man's badge caught her eye. Too clean, too new, the plastic still catching light in a way older badges never did. A small, cold feeling settled in her stomach, the kind she'd learned not to ignore. She didn't have time to name what was wrong before the men proved her right. The tools hit the floor. What came out from beneath their jackets wasn't tools at all. The lobby dissolved into screaming within seconds. Employees who moments earlier had been too important to greet a 6-year-old girl now shoved past each other toward the exits, leaving her standing alone and frozen in the chaos. Amara didn't think. She ran toward the danger instead of away from it, scooping Suah up against her chest just as one of the men lunged in the girl's direction. Amara turned her own back to take the blow instead, felt it land hard across her shoulder, and kept running anyway. "Hold on to me tight, baby," she whispered, already moving. "I've got you. I'm not letting go." 8 years of mopping every inch of that building meant Amara knew shortcuts no executive had ever bothered to learn. A service corridor behind the stairwell, a break room only cleaning staff used, a maintenance door near the loading dock. She used every one of them, Suah's arms locked around her neck, her small heart hammering the whole way. By the time real security arrived, weapons drawn, shouting orders that sent the fake maintenance men sprinting for the exits, Amara and Suah were 3 floors away, hidden in a stairwell, both of them shaking. The kidnappers vanished into the city before anyone could catch them. Nobody left behind could explain who they were, or why they'd come for one small girl. Suah broke down the moment the adrenaline faded, sobbing into Amara's shoulder, and Amara held her there on the cold concrete steps, rocking her gently, whispering that she was safe now, that it was over. She had no idea her own safety was about to end instead. The building went into lockdown within the hour, security sweeping every floor, executives huddled behind closed doors. Amara expected exhaustion, questions, maybe even someone saying thank you. Instead, Han Soo-jin called the entire staff together in the lobby, her composure untouched by anything that had just happened. "I've reviewed what occurred today," she said, folding her hands in front of her. "Miss Okafor's decision to move the child without authorization directly interfered with our security team's response. Her actions put this company at unnecessary risk. No footage was shown. Nobody asked to see any." The executives nodded along, because questioning Han Soo-jin had never once ended well for anyone who tried. "She should have just stayed in her lane," someone murmured near the back, "just loud enough to carry." Amara said nothing, because she had learned long ago that defending herself in that building never made a difference. "You're fired," Han said simply. "Effective immediately." Suah cried out, reaching for Amara as security gently pulled them apart. Amara knelt one last time in front of her. "You did so good today," she whispered. "You were so brave. Keep being brave, you hear me?" Nobody noticed the small hand that slipped Amara's laminated housekeeping badge free and pressed it deep into a pocket, holding onto it like proof that any of it had really happened. Amara walked out through the same lobby she'd bled for 2 hours earlier. Nobody stopped her. Nobody said a word. Somewhere across the ocean, her mother had no idea her daughter had just lost the only income keeping her medicine cabinet full. Kang Min-jae landed in Seoul 11 hours later, his jaw tight through the entire flight, his phone pressed to his ear the whole way. This was the first time most of the world would ever properly see him, calm in the way that made people nervous, powerful in the way that made rooms go quiet the moment he entered them. He found his daughter curled in a private room at headquarters, refusing every doctor, every bodyguard, every attempt at comfort. Until he stepped through the door. "Appa," Su'a whispered, and something in his chest finally loosened as he crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. It took nearly an hour before she was calm enough to speak, and when she finally did, there was only one thing she wanted him to know. "The maid saved me," she said, pressing a laminated badge into his hand. "She held me the whole time. She wasn't scared. And they fired her." Kang Min-jae looked down at the name printed beneath the photo. "Why was she fired?" he asked quietly, to no one in particular, because nobody in that room had an answer. His expression didn't change all at once. It shifted slowly, the way weather changes before a storm, calm giving way to something colder, sharper, already deciding what came next. Follow along to see what Kang Min-jae does when he learns the truth. And tell me your city in the comments. I'll be saying hello to as many of you as I can. She pressed something small into his palm, a laminated badge, corners worn soft from being held too tightly for too many hours. "You have to find her." He looked down at the name beneath the photo. "Amara Okafor. Housekeeping." "I will," he said quietly. "I promise you, I will." He left her in the care of a nurse and went downstairs, jaw tight. He found Han Soo-ji near the elevator banks, composed as ever, a fresh cup of coffee in one hand like the day hadn't nearly ended in tragedy. "I need to see the security footage from this afternoon," he said. She turned, taking him in with the mild curiosity of someone assessing whether a stranger was worth her time. "And you are?" "Sua's father." For exactly 3 seconds, nobody in the lobby moved. Then Han laughed, not warmly, but the way someone laughs at a joke told badly. "I'm afraid that's impossible. I met Kang Min-jae myself, years ago, before he stepped back from the company. I'd know his face anywhere, and it isn't yours." Her voice cooled. "So whoever you are, I'd stop pretending." Kang studied her for a moment longer than the situation called for. She was certain she'd recognize him, and she was looking directly at him without a flicker of doubt. A decade had changed more than she realized. Interesting. Very interesting. A faint smile touched his mouth. "You're right. I misspoke. I'm one of her personal bodyguards." Han relaxed instantly. "That makes far more sense. I still need the footage." "That won't be possible. Bodyguards don't give me orders. I answer only to Mr. Kang, and he hasn't set foot in this building in years. Until he does, you'll get nothing from me." Kang let the silence sit a moment before asking the only question he'd actually come down to ask. "Who fired the maid who protected the child today?" Han lifted her chin, proud of the answer before she gave it. "I did." He nodded once, filed it away, and walked out without another word. He didn't sleep that night. The two of them had met exactly once, years ago, at a brief handover meeting before he'd disappeared into the version of himself that existed only in overseas calls and quarterly reports signed from a distance. He'd been younger then, leaner, clean-shaven, a different man in nearly every visible way. Han remembered a face that no longer entirely existed, and she trusted that memory completely, which meant she'd never think to look twice at the man standing in front of her now. He had no intention of announcing himself yet. Han had already shown him exactly what she was capable of when cornered, and he wasn't willing to hand her a warning before he had proved strong enough to survive whatever she tried next. By morning, his security team had confirmed the missing footage, the reassigned guards, the encrypted messages leading straight to Han's private line. He kept his identity to himself and walked back into Min-jae Group the next day still wearing the borrowed title of bodyguard, quietly requesting a seat at the emergency board meeting Han had called to address the previous day's security failure. The boardroom was already tense when he slipped in near the back. Han stood at the head of the table, composed, rehearsed, laying out a version of events that made her look like the only steady hand in a building that had nearly fallen apart. The footage in question has unfortunately been corrupted, she was telling the board when Kang arrived. A server failure during the attack. Unfortunate timing, but nothing more. Several board members nodded, visibly relieved to have somewhere to file the whole incident away. One of them, an older man who'd sat on the board for over a decade, spoke up in her defense. Han Soo-jin has run this company flawlessly for 3 years. I see no reason to question her account. Kang watched the room lean in her favor and understood, in that moment, exactly how close she'd come to walking away clean. Corrupted footage. A board too comfortable to ask hard questions. If he hadn't ordered his own technical team to pull a mirrored backup the moment he'd first requested the recordings, the truth would have vanished along with the rest of the evidence she'd already destroyed. He stood. Before this board closes the matter, he said, I'd like to show you something my own people recovered independently, before Miss Han's server failure conveniently erased the original. Han's composure slipped for the first time. Who let him in here? I did, Kang said, and nodded to the technician waiting by the door. The screen at the end of the table flickered to life. The room watched in silence as the restored footage played, Han reassigning trusted guards without explanation, unlocking the East Service entrance herself, exchanging coded messages with a man in a maintenance jacket less than an hour before he tried to disappear with a 6-year-old girl. The older board member who defended her went pale and said nothing else. This is fabricated, Han said, but her voice had lost its certainty. It's timestamped, verified, and backed up on servers you don't control, Kang said. Which is more than I can say for whatever you deleted. He set Amara's badge down on the table in front of her. You also fired the only person in this building who actually protected that child. I'd like the board to understand exactly who they were prepared to trust. Silence spread through the room. Who are you, Han said quietly, to be showing this board anything at all? Kang looked at her for a long moment. You told me yesterday you'd know Kang Min-jae's face anywhere, he said. You were right that you'd met him once. You were wrong to think 10 years wouldn't change it. He paused. I'm Kang Min-jae. I've owned every share of this company since before you were hired to run it. Nobody in the room breathed. Security, Kang said, without raising his voice. Take her into custody. Han shot to her feet. You can't do this. I ran this company for 3 years. You managed it, Kang said. For 3 years, while I trusted you completely. That trust is the only reason my daughter was nearly taken from me yesterday. She was still protesting when they led her out of the boardroom, her voice fading down the hallway until the doors closed behind her. He asked only one question once the lobby had cleared. Where is Amara Okafor? Nobody in the building knew. It took his team less than an hour to find her address, and by early evening, a convoy of black SUVs pulled up outside a modest apartment building in a quiet part of the city, drawing curtains aside in every window along the street. Amara opened her door already bracing herself, certain the men outside had come to ask more questions about a job she no longer had, a day she was still trying to understand. Instead, she found Kang Min-jae standing on her doorstep, and Suah slipping past his legs before he could say a word. Auntie Amara. The girl collided with her in a hug so fierce it nearly knocked her off balance, and Amara sank to her knees right there in the doorway, holding on tight, tears coming before she could stop them. You saved my daughter's life, Kang said, once Suah finally let go enough for him to speak. And my company repaid you by throwing you out onto the street. I intend to correct that, if you'll let me. He pressed the housekeeping badge back into her hands, the same one Suah had refused to release for an entire day. This badge reminded my daughter that heroes still exist in this world, he said. I don't intend to let the woman who wears it clean floors for the rest of her career. He tore the termination letter in half in front of her, she hadn't even realized he was holding it, and offered her something else entirely. Not her old position back, but a new one, Director of Employee Welfare and Community Relations, built specifically around the instinct she'd shown without being asked to. Someone with that kind of compassion, he told her, belonged in a room where decisions got made, not in a hallway nobody thanked her for cleaning. Amara stood in her doorway, overwhelmed, and said yes before she'd even fully processed the question. Months later, Min-jae Group looked like a different company entirely. Executives who once stepped around cleaning carts without a glance now knew every staff member's name. Every worker, from the newest janitor to the senior partners on the top floor, was treated with the same baseline respect Amara had spent 12 years being denied. Suah still visited her almost every afternoon after school, dropping her backpack by the office door and demanding peppermints, calling her Auntie Amara so naturally that most of the staff had stopped remembering a time she hadn't. The final image, the one that stuck with anyone who witnessed it, was Amara walking through the same marble lobby where she'd once been fired in front of a room full of people who wouldn't meet her eyes. This time, every employee she passed greeted her by name, some with a small bow, some simply with warmth that had never once been extended to her before. From the glass wall of his office upstairs, Kang Min-jae watched her cross the lobby, a quiet smile settling over features that rarely gave anything away. Nobody in that building knew yet what he was already beginning to feel. But for the first time since his wife had died, he found himself hoping for something more than gratitude. That story, he decided, could wait to be written. For now, it was enough to watch the woman who'd saved his daughter walk through his company like she finally belonged exactly where she stood.